Oh, hey, here I am. And great to not see you, but sense your presence at the other side of the internet. My name is Chaz Evans. I'm Director of Exhibitions for VGA Gallery and your host for this tonight's episode of VGA Fireside with Fern Goldfarb-Ramallo. I am going to begin with a series of thank yous and credits because, as always, gratitude is the true path that we try to follow here at VGA Gallery. So I'd like to thank the producer and director of operations for VGA Gallery, Bryce Poles. I'd like to thank our designer and director of communications, Eleanor Schichtel. I'd like to thank the VGA staff and the VGA board. I'd like to thank the Independent Game Designers Association Chicago chapter. Thank you to Ross for helping spread the word. I want to thank welcome, rather, for students who may be out there tuning in with us today. I want to welcome the game design students from the University of Wisconsin, thanks to Peter. I want to welcome media art and graphic design and illustration students from the School of Visual Art and Design at the University of South Carolina, thanks to Amina and Marius for helping spread the word. I want to say hello and welcome to game design program students from DePaul University, thanks to Caleb for helping spread the word, and welcome to the media art and game design module students in radio, TV, film at Northwestern University, thanks to Derek. And finally, let's welcome Tulane University students, if they're digital media practices students from Tulane. Welcome. Very glad to have you, and thanks to John for helping spread the word. I want to thank the Electric Mirrors for the very groovy intro music you were just enjoying, and I want to thank the Oldham Music Center Youth Brass Band for the VGA Fireside fanfare that you are about to enjoy. And before we get started, if you know an organization or a group that would be interested in this program, or have any feedback for us at all, please drop us a line at info@vgagallery.org. We would love to hear from you. Without any more credits or welcomes, Bryce, please hit us with the VGA Fireside fanfare. That's it. That's the fanfare that brings it all together and fills me with the energy that I need to interview today's guest who I'm about to introduce. So today, VGA Gallery welcomes Fern Goldfarb-Ramallo for today's episode of VGA Fireside. Goldfarb-Ramallo is a creative coder, designer, and visual artist based in Brooklyn and Berlin. They work across numerous platforms, developing playful creative tools for digital art making. Their projects Panoramical and Raunchy Feast XXX were featured in past VGA exhibitions, The Ears Have Walls and Polymorphism, respectively. Everyone at home, please help me welcome Fern Goldfarb-Ramallo.
Hey, everyone.
Welcome.
How's it going? Thank you.
It's going good. I'm speaking for the chorus of silent applause.
I hear it. I hear it inside of me,
of the
everywhere. Yeah,
there we go. It's not just for me; it's for others too.
Yeah, I feel like we're back. We're right back in lockdown, and just talking to a screen.
Talking to the screen.
Yeah.
Feasting on whatever energy we can get from little text graphics.
Yeah.
That come our way. It would be something we perhaps do well into the future. Anyway, how are things? How are things in Berlin, Fern?
Pretty good. Very warm. Just enjoying some of the summer sunshine here and making some things, some music,
Good.
a lot of things.
And there's those things and music that perhaps we can discuss this evening while we have you on the show. So
we'll
see. I mean, it depends on will I crack the code? Will we? Will the questions be right? We'll find out. So I mentioned this usually at the top of each episode. We have people who are tuning in, either live or in the future, are often interested in joining the world of video game art, video game making, in the various capacities that it can be joined. And so it's always useful and interesting to simply start out by asking you how your general origin story and how you joined this field in the first place. So basically, Fern, how did you get involved in video game making?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, thanks for having me. This is amazing. Thanks for the opportunity to chat with you guys. And the way that I get into video games, I mean, I always play games all throughout my childhood, right? Like it was always kind of like a way of dealing with the world, a way maybe to not deal with the world. And there were always computers around at home. Maybe even before they were like a little more common, since both my parents worked with computers and they made software and they made accounting software. So there was definitely like a lot of opportunities to like check out games. And then when I got into college, I never really thought about getting into making games. There was I studied audiovisual design, a little bit like animation and art, but games came like much later in my early 20s when I kind of had the opportunity to work with a local games company and kind of like got a little bit of a window into what it actually takes to make a game. And that was kind of like close to when sort of like the initial maybe independent game scene was starting to happen. And so I was hearing and seeing a lot of new games that were coming out. This was like 2008, something like that. That were really like piquing my interest in making games that were not just maybe what you would see in the mainstream, but maybe like a little more experimental. And yeah, that's how I started making games on my own. I kind of like like learned the tools and started connecting with people that were also making games for a living, which was kind of like wild back in the day.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so yeah, with years later, trying to make my own projects, working with wonderful people, is how I got into the whole thing.
And the community that you're interacting with, are people found and interacted with online or in a particular city or institution?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it was online. Like it was the age of like maybe Tick Source, this forum for independent game developers. I started going to conferences like festivals like Indicate, and GDC, all these events that were happening every year where people would just sort of gather because they were interested in sort of like using video games as a medium for kind of like artistic creation more than like commercial games. And yeah, that's how like I got connected to a lot of people and had like a really wonderful time sort of being in that space and having sort of sharing this excitement to make an entire game on your own or
Yeah.
with a handful of people.
And was that kind of extra affordance of creative autonomy that you could sense very clearly at that particular moment in time that seemed to draw you in? Is that too leading?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was like I didn't know what I was doing. I was like, these games look cool. I wanna. There's this place you can go, and like I had the privilege and ability to be able to travel. I was living in Argentina at the time. It was like a very big investment to sort of go all the way to like Los Angeles, and
Yeah.
so through this sort of like interactions is I was mostly kind of like playing it by ear and liking the games that people were making and kind of like seeing if I could prove to myself that I could also kind of like make something that people would like, that would resonate with people.
So while you are familiarizing yourself with this cultural context, are there any things that are explicitly not games or non-game kinds of media that you are working in or are influencing you that sort of perhaps intersects with your interest? If the answer is no, you were completely focused on games. That's also perfectly.
Yeah, I mean, at the time it was very easy to have like a little bit of a tunnel vision where, like, okay, it's all about games. But I was definitely influenced by a lot of like the other interests that I had in college. Like I was watching a lot of like film, a lot of animation. I was kind of like absorbing a lot of music. And so, I think part of my early kind of like college experience was about kind of like just absorbing as many types of like media that I could, not necessarily focused on one type of media that I wanted to create, but sort of like just being embedded in it.
Yeah.
And then when it came to making games, I feel like I don't know, I had a lot of opinions maybe about the kind of works that I was seeing, the kind of approaches that I was seeing, and how it's still very tied to maybe specific aesthetics, specific genres. Some of the work was happening from this like some fraction of the production that was happening. But mostly I was just excited by how nice people were. For the most part, I got to make a lot of friends, and that came with like the privilege of being able to like exist in those spaces and participate. But yeah, it was more like peer plan whatsoever.
That well, I could still understand you. You were the audio was becoming a little bit vote coded future robot voice. It honestly sounds very cool, but I don't know if perhaps we do need to reset something to get the microphone normal. No, you sound
Sorry
okay
about
now.
that.
It's
Sounds okay now?
great.
Cool.
Just briefly drifted off into the realm of becoming a vocal cyborg.
Sorry about that.
It's nothing to apologize for.
Yeah.
It's a kind of treat. Anyway, so you've gone through some big events. You're learning more about the field and you're meeting more people. And at some point, you embark on making this project Panoramical. And I do want to say, so I will go out on a limb and say that Panoramical, to me, and I think many others, is this landmark work, in the decade of the sort of rising awareness and visibility of indie game titles, or we would throw around the term art games as well.
Thank you.
And in fact, was one of the kinds of projects that, for me as a curator and academic around games, led me to know this was a field that I could, in fact, really invest in and pull apart, because work like this now existed, right? So I'm very excited, therefore, to have you on to talk about that project briefly and sort of how you feel, what was happening creatively for you when you started making it, and then also sort of like what kind of reflections you have on that project now that it's 2022 and it's several years behind us. I guess we could start by, well, that was probably too many questions and also some praise. But yeah, tell us about sort of like set the scene for when the production for Panoramical gets going.
Yeah, well, I really appreciate the comments. It means a lot that it resonated so well.
Yeah.
And what was happening at the time? Yeah, so I had met what would become my collaborator, David Canega, at one of these festivals. And yeah, what was happening often is that we would prototype or play around with some things and trying to we were doing a lot of game jams at the time. And so yeah, this idea that we were all about kind of making very small experiments and seeing if something's there, or trying to make a small experience that you can actually ship and put out there, or show at one of these festivals that had a lot of opportunities to showcase work in front of a lot of people. And it was a little bit maybe insular, or maybe it was a very small community at the time, and it was exciting for a newcomer for someone in it to kind of be able to have an audience for your work that is in front of you, and is very excited to try different ideas. And so yeah, at the time I had a small community in Buenos Aires, that a group of friends that were also making games. I had David and some people in these festivals that I was going to. So there's a feeling of a network of kind of creative energy happening, and a lot of space to try new ideas and have them in front of people and seeing what happens.
Yeah.
And yeah, Panoramical came about from one of those moments where I was staying with David after one of these big conferences, and he had some MIDI controllers, so these controllers that you can use to make music. I wasn't making any music at the time. I actually only started making music last year. So this was all very unfamiliar to me. That this idea that you have maybe you don't only have to make games for a games controller or a keyboard. You can use knobs and sliders and pods and keys, and we started playing with this idea of what if we use this device as a game controller rather than a regular games controller. And that's where just playing around with things, we started putting I think we did a little thing where I put together some gameplay. I put some shapes that grew and shrank based on the pots that you were changing, and at the same time he was sort of using the same device and controlling music parameters in a music software that he was very familiar with. So we kind of just run both softwares together getting input from the same controller, and basically had like a new media art installation, right? Like something like that, like an interactive audio visual toy. And yeah, we kind of like started growing from there. We were like, okay, we have this. There was a call for projects to show Indicate, and we got into this idea of like, well, what if we like work on this a little bit more, collaborate, and show it around, and that's how it sort of came about.
So it seems like a particularly intuitive and just collaborative sort of spark. It wasn't that the two of you sat in a boardroom and said, what we're going to do is make a game that's highly sound and visual based interactions that people haven't seen before. Instead, it was just days, maybe nights of experimentation and playing around with MIDI controllers and sounds.
Yeah, they were just kind of like, it was whatever was around like the table or we're having breakfast, and like, you know, David had like a bunch of MIDI controllers, and yeah, I think I was very curious. I was sort of like fascinated with this idea of like also a little bit going against the grain, being like, okay, no controllers, no mouse, no keyboard. We need like, let's just use this. And then, you know, the question was like, okay, how do we if we make it like a bigger game and release it commercially, how are people gonna play it without a MIDI controller? Like, you know, we were like, okay, we'll figure that out later. Like, so yeah, and I think it was like, I think once it got a little bigger and we sort of decided to seek funding for it, I think for me personally, the goal was to hijack the video game storefronts and the video game community with like a new media installation art piece that was like posing as a commercial video game.
Yeah.
And yeah,
like it's sort of being smuggled into this commercial context.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I kind of felt that way when making an art gallery for video games too. So that's we've talked about enough of it, but so without actually showing the audience what it looks like, when we can talk about it more. So could you share a demonstration of Panoramical while we're talking?
Yeah, for sure. Let's see. I'm not gonna be playing it. I'm gonna be watching someone play it, which is very exciting.
That's right.
So it's gonna be like a DVD commentary.
That's
remember DVDs. Yeah.
This is, or we could pretend that you're playing mentally, and there was a new controller invented.
Yeah.
All right. So here we have the opening screen. So I guess.
So maybe I can explain a little bit what the game is about. So in Panoramical, you're basically playing a series of landscapes that are interactive, and you're doing this with this kind of like, you see like this kind of like two-dimensional controls, and each control on the y-axis and the x-axis will control a different parameter of the landscape, and at the same time it will change a parameter of the audio. So you make one level go up and you get mountains, you make one level go up and you get circles or different shapes, and you'll get like a little bit like of a reactive audio.
So right now we have a landscape that kind of looks like vector graphics, the sort of outline forms that are being changed as the different two-axis pads are manipulated.
And yeah, so like that's like a little intro that teaches you controls. And I think maybe we can skip. Yeah, we can skip to one of the levels. And there's a very, very dramatic introduction scene. It's very, you know, bombastic.
Yes.
But I think the meat of the game is sort of, you have this sort of series of basically like contained little worlds that you play for as long as you want. So at any point you can hold spacebar and kind of like come out of that scene and move to the next one. And it's a very open-ended sort of like experience, right? Like you're presented with all of these controls and all of these possibilities, and you get to pick sort of, which shapes feel good, control the pacing. It's a little bit kind of like, hard. It's one of the things, like, it's hard to explain, but once you play, you get it.
Yeah.
And so the game is sort of like, without saying anything, prompting you to zone out, kind of relax and just play with whatever shapes appear as you're changing the controls. And the way you control it on PC is you hold one of these keys, Q, W, E, S, D, Y, X, E. Hold the key and move the mouse up and down, left and right. And that's going to control like these parameters, right? So you can kind of like create a little performance by yourself by slowly changing the parameters and seeing how the landscape responds, right?
So we're watching Bryce create such a performance, and I guess we're sort of interrupting the sound part of it by talking.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe we'll just listen to this for a moment.
Yeah, sounds good.
So one thing I always think about when reflecting on Panoramical is how intuitive it feels for the landscape elements to be mapped to these different sonic stems. It seems like it does have a logic, but what that logic is very difficult, maybe impossible to sort of put into plain natural language. And that sort of sounds reflected in the anecdote about how the game started taking off, right? That it was sort of improvisational and intuitive, yet it's implemented in such a like thorough and complete way, right? Where there is still like places to ground yourself, like this was effectively a menu for getting to these different worlds, And on top of that, there's all these different ways that it can be interacted with, which I guess is something else that I think is really worth remarking on with this project. Yes, you can use keyboard and mouse, but you can also map it to different kinds of MIDI controllers. And so that, I mean, this kind of ties to a conversation we were having last month with Amanda Hudgens about alternative controllers and how making sure that there are these different paths towards interacting with the work makes all these suggestions about non-normative play. So there's sort of a single way that this is supposed to be done. Or a single assumed kind of user, or even a single assumed kind of like body of that user, right? I don't know if it was working towards a question there, but but is it, when this was exhibited in our VGA exhibition in 2016, 2017, we had it installed with the MIDI controller and set up a keyboard and mouse, so that it felt very much like the active listening of a sound operator became the sort of the focus of a performance, right? As opposed to being behind the scenes thing that became the thing to not just look at, but also inhabit. So I guess, those are all exciting aspects about the project that I've drawn from it. And I guess I wanted to know if those were things, the non-normative playfulness, like all these different ways to interact with it. And also like the finding a way to turn the skills of or the experience of like a sound technician or operator into like a performance that anyone can do. If those were parts of the project that you were intending or expecting.
Right. Yeah, I think what happened was that was very much like the influence of David, who did the music and co-designed it with me, in that he had his own flavor of the sort of music performances that he was putting on and kind of music that he was making, and the process of making that music that I got a peek into it was very playful, very intuitive, and sort of like layering things on top of each other in a way that really resonated with the way that I wanted to make games or the way that I wanted to produce my work. And I don't think there was much of an objective for the piece itself and how it was gonna be played. I think we kind of like learned that as we were showing the work in different places, because as we were making it, we also were lucky enough to get invited to show it at a lot of different events. It ended up showing in like I don't know, like 30 or more different museums around the world. We got to travel with it and show it in different places. And yeah, the original sort of like design for the game involved the MIDI controller that David had. That was basically a set of 9 knobs, like 9 sliders that go up and down, and on top of it there's a knob that goes, you can turn it around. And then so the design of the game was basically made into like all of these channels, right? Like 9 channels of shapes or effects, and a way of like incrementing or decreasing the value and modifying it with the top. And that, became sort of what drove the design. And what we found as we were showing it to people, especially in environments that they weren't always museums, even though there were several galleries that we showed it at. But it was a little like a public-facing museum-like experience, some festival out on the street, or a lot of times there weren't even like, the audience wasn't necessarily people that were versed with video games, but came to see, like an interesting exhibit. And so the way that a lot of people play it, sort of like gave us a hint that we had something interesting going on with this kind of interaction, where we noticed that people that would have had a hard time maybe grabbing a games controller and seeing it as a device that they might break or that they might be confused by. When you have a control that, first of all, it's unfamiliar, so it makes you kind of like lean into it a little bit with a little more curiosity, and where you have very clear sort of like movements, this goes up, this goes down, this turns around. I think put people in like a very playful sort of like mindset already. And I think what I tried to do from the design was to enable this sort of flow of the player where you didn't need to wait to see a reaction from the game. As soon as you turn the knob up, you will see an immediate reaction in the game, both in the visuals and the sound, right?
Yeah.
So I think that made for a very tight sort of like experience. And yeah, I mean, I noticed that people would really zone out to it. Sometimes we would show it with either this controller. At some point, we built our own controller. This Brendan Byrne, a friend from New York, made us this little box with a bunch of pots, and that made it so that it was an even more unfamiliar sort of device, but that was very clearly, built to be played with and fit more nicely in like a gallery setting. So we noticed a lot of different behaviors in people, from sharing the controller with a stranger, or people laying down on the floor just like observing sort of like the experience that someone was performing for them. And like I saw a lot of kids play. That was also really, really cool. And so it was very interesting to see how much this kind of like type control afforded kind of like a different and more a different kind of experience for people that really resonated.
It's really interesting to compare like how just this scenario is going to read as playful or inviting to different audience members, and how that to some people the sort of dual thumbstick controller type is incredibly familiar, but then it's very alienating for many others as well. And the MIDI controller is probably less familiar overall, like as far as like how many audience members might be approaching the work.
But I think, just to interrupt you for a second.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no, sorry. I think one point you make about that is that it is an unfamiliar object when you see a custom-made MIDI controller. but when you see a games controller, I think there's an element of shame and judgment that comes with approaching a device like this, where a lot of people will feel this thing of, they'll tell you like, I don't know how to play games. I might do something wrong and I might be judged for it.
Yeah.
But if you're approaching an art installation with a custom control that looks like an alien device, it's very clear that there's no wrong way to play it, right? It's there for you to play with.
So that sort of idea that you are probably going to be evaluated is even associated with the sort of normal controller type itself, and that I think speaks so directly to what one of the sort of core ideas of this Express, especially at the time it was released. So it felt so as a project, to me, felt so committed to not evaluating the user, right? But you still, as you said, there's still going to be immediate feedback. There's going to be this reaction to as soon as one knob is turned, like something is going to happen. But how you've managed to sort of convince someone that they're not going to have a score or a judgment afterwards, and you can sort of feel that that's not coming, even when you're sort of being greeted by the work at the same time, is kind of an incredible thing.
Yeah, I mean, I cannot just put it there and hope for the best. I mean, I just like unlucky, I guess.
Yeah, for sure. And in the same way you were saying, it was interesting to try to sneak a new media interactive artwork or something that would be conceived as that into a commercial games sort of downloadable space. In the same way you're doing the opposite, right? Where you're taking a downloadable commercial game and sneaking it into the art gallery.
Yeah. It's just that I felt like such a disconnect, right? Like, and I think what drove me into games is also like this disconnect between like the art world and the games world, and I always saw myself like kind of like in the middle or interested in all of these things, and I saw such a divide, right, that I wanted to kind of like either help bridge that or sort of stubbornly be like guys, we should make something like this.
Well, let me just ask you one more question about Panoramical, and we simply must move on to other and even more recent work. But now,
sounds good.
Just the last thing I will ask is, from the vantage point of May 2022, is there anything about Panoramical that is just like very present to you, or something that's sort of coming out of it, looking at it in this day that you didn't realize or didn't expect in the early 2010s?
I mean, I definitely didn't expect to get like a reaction like you had, or to have it resonate like that. I also didn't expect it to run on current hardware, so I'm like, even though it doesn't work in the new Macs, I guess. So
it does.
And I mean, I can see a little bit of like, in retrospect, how like the things that I was interested at the time are the same things that I'm interested in now, that I have always been interested in, and so it's kind of like I see bouts of the same sort of like design thinking and panoramical sort of like flavor in a lot of my projects now. So I think that's
so it's so continuing those interests and goals. And we turn to a newer project. It's the Sims Rowdy Remixes, another project that does deal with sound, and it does engage with the sort of icons and semiotics of commercial games, but moves them into a space that they are not normally associated.
Puts them in a blender.
Can you tell us about this project and maybe even share?
So I mean, after Panoramical came out, so I worked on it for like a good 3 years with David, and it was a big moment to like release it, and came out, and I think it came out maybe at a time where like it was definitely becoming like a lot harder to make a living out of games, and so I think some of those expectations were met, and I think it resulted in like a lot of burnout for myself, and I hadn't been able to kind of like work on a project of that scope since, And so the way that I did produce some work throughout the years was through some commissions and some people inviting me to, like having this Kickstarter, having this event, having this new space that I cared about. Want to make a game for it, and so that way I made like a couple small games, and so Sims Random Remixes came in as a commission for some of my friends in Brooklyn were opening a game space, a bar with indie arcades, and yeah, they invited me to make a game for their Kickstarter to raise funds for it. And so, since they were very open to kind of like, existing outside of like a normal sort of like commercial storefront space, and this was a game that was gonna go directly into people for supporting this project. I felt like I had a lot of freedom to kind of like do whatever I wanted, and I had always played a lot of The Sims, when I was 14 or whatever, and I just have like such an appreciation for it. And so I made this game where I basically ripped all of the assets from the original Sims game. Basically, like there's all these tools that you can use to parse all the original files and turn them into like usable files, and you can get all of the images so that make up the objects. You can get all of the audio files, right? At that time, I was participating in this sort of experimental school called School for Poetic Computation, that we're using digital tools to make art in interesting ways. And one of those was, for example, using scrapism, where scraping the internet to gather a bunch of assets and make an artwork based on it. So I think I was very influenced by this idea of gathering a lot of things and objects and use it as material for a piece. And yeah, so I like the idea of just grabbing all the assets for The Sims and seeing what happens. And yeah, so maybe we can play a little bit of it. It's a little bit of a put The Sims assets in a blender and.
Yes, please. One question, because I always like to sort of historicize stuff. If there was a discourse or like a group of people interested in scraping assets as a kind of movement, a creative movement, were there more other artists who are interested in doing scrapist works specifically with The Sims, or were those efforts going in all kinds of different directions?
I think for me it was for The Sims. I think I appreciated the quality of the work that went into making all of these assets, as she was just kind of like going through them, looking at the sprites, looking at the pixel art. They were just very beautiful images. Even if you play the game now, it looks really good.
Yeah.
And so that's I think where I came from. Yeah. So one thing about this, the story of the game is a fan of the game in 1998 finds a leak of all of the, like a work in progress for The Sims before it comes out, and he's so excited about playing it that he's teaching himself game development, and he can't wait. He's too excited, and so he goes into these Sims forums and posts this sort of like file, this interactive thing that he made, and yeah, he says, when the Sims start to become a big, I'm not gonna hate such a middle, just looking for access to really much Sims. I get the other that I also can't really enjoy this, and I don't care wait anymore, so I took it over myself to my own version. So here's the Sims release. I just got this, maybe what I imagine Sims to be when it comes out, based on the leaks and screenshots I've seen so far. Yeah, and so here we have it. Maybe we have audio show, and you have your little character, and you get to, like this person didn't really know how to program games, and so he really worked really hard to put this together.
Right.
So the gameplay isn't quite gonna be what he saw in the videos, and then he also didn't really know how the Sims played, because all he's seen is all these videos that were coming out, these announcements. And so you get to see this sort of like liminal space of a video game fan game of what would a person come up with when they're 13 years old, and I don't know, they teach themselves game maker and try and make something.
Yeah.
And so
it refers to The Sims and all the pleasures and fun that people have derived from it, but then just completely has its own logic. It's just sort of like what happens when and why, right? Like, it's like, how did we just get the fire to happen just now? Like, what would have made that occur?
Yeah, so what you have is this very crude interface where it kind of invites you to just experiment with it and see what happens, where you have a little sort of like page button where you can walk around and paint the environment with you're trying to create your beautiful dream home, but all you have is this paintbrush on your feet, and you have to walk around and draw. And so this person didn't know how to make an editor. They just made a button, and you press it, and it just chooses an asset at random from a list, right? So when you want to draw grass, you just choose grass, and then you might get like all this random grass. If you're trying to furnish your home, you're gonna kind of like roll the dice, and you have some food that you can put around for your Sims to eat. And of course you need doors. There's a lot of doors in The Sims. And yeah,
similar to Panoramical, you'll never sort of get an evaluation or even like a sort of a directive. Of
well, he didn't really know how to program and like scores and stuff.
Yeah, of course.
That, so
you don't do that.
Yeah.
So you just have assets and buttons, and for as long as you want.
Yes.
Well, I don't want to cut this demonstration off, but we perhaps can also talk about a variation or an evolution of this project, and something that you might want to do live for us tonight on the stream.
Yeah, so I was we were talking about this, and I was reminded of that project, and I showed it once at this amazing event that my friend Todd Anderson runs in Brooklyn called Warhack, and it's kind of like a very beautiful community of creators that use language and poetry and digital creation in interesting ways, sometimes intersecting with video games, sometimes intersecting with like data mining and all sorts of like tool making. And so I was invited to do a performance there, and I had this game. So I basically I like the idea of keeping in the same vein of reusing these beautiful assets, using those to create a performance of sorts. And one thing that I found was that the audio files for when the Sims are taking a shower, they have, in the Sims, there's all this made up language in the Simlish. And so all of the recordings for they had actual voice actors, pretending to talk this made up language. And so for showering, when the Sims are entering the shower and they're showering, there's this really beautiful recordings of someone in a studio singing their heart out in this exaggerated way, that I think are they stand on their own as beautiful little art pieces. And so what we're gonna do today is I'm gonna take those beautiful singing and sonnets, poems, and we're gonna play them back in a sort of kind of like open mic jazz club, like poetry night, where you're maybe you're familiar with, like, you go to a bar and there's a little spoken word, there's someone on the bass or someone on like a piano playing some music to it, And so we're gonna be transported. I'm gonna play a little piano, a little bit bass to it, and we're gonna be transported to this sort of like beautiful The Sims remix cafe night.
This sounds incredibly exciting.
like-
We are everyone at home, we're incredibly lucky. Fern is going to transport us in such a way on the stream right now. Fern, take it away whenever you're ready.
All right. So let's see. We're gonna switch over here. So here we have a really beautiful cafe. Since I didn't really have a way to add all the doors and the floors. Sorry, the walls and the door and the floors. It's set in a garden, you know. One thing I want to show real quick first is when working on The Sims remixes, I basically grabbed all of the sprites, all of the little graphics that make up all of the objects, and just threw them out into the sort of palette. And this, you can see them, like they all fit in this beautiful nice square. Like these are all of the graphics that make up all of the objects. And since, you know, you have different views, they spliced it up in chunks, right? And since it wasn't, you know, I could have ordered this and made sure, you know, I could group them in a way that made sense, but you know, that's not that fun. So the way that that I would build these kind of like environments was just to kind of like pick and choose a chunk of here and then put it into you know, this environment. So we're gonna be transported into this beautiful garden cafe. We have like a little stage area, some chairs and tables. People are gonna be having drinks, and a little bar. And once we hit play, we're gonna see it populated with beautiful Sims. These are using the, you know, the original skins for the Sims, and if they look a little different from the way you remember them on the video game, that's actually your memory is failing you. This is actually how they looked. So you might wanna check out the original game. Yeah, so let's just see if we can go to like a beautiful cafe. So yeah, welcome to Poetry Cafe, spoken word, using serenade, shower, and laughing wave sound files from The Sims.
no fool, no.
Oh. I don't know if you. I'm applauding. Oh gosh. Oh gosh. Everyone at home, applaud so loudly that Fern can hear you in Berlin, please. Thank you so much.
Loud.
I have never seen a collaboration between a live human musician and Simlish.
It's my honor.
It's truly ours. I honestly really appreciate you performing that for us this evening. But wow, we still have a little bit before we run out of time. Let me ask you questions about that and basically sound and music are so very much present in that performance as well as Panoramical naturally. So you mentioned earlier that you weren't. You didn't consider yourself a musician, you weren't playing music earlier in your early projects like Panoramical, and here you are playing beautifully for us in the current day. So I guess I want to know if you have some reflections on the role of musicianship and sort of creative coding or being a creative technologist or game dev. If those are very separate roles, or if you consider them interrelated in any fashion.
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing that I can think about is how when the time that I was making Panoramical, you know, the thing that you were saying about like, I definitely thought myself like in tunnel vision of like, okay, I'm definitely gonna make games. I'm a game maker. I don't need anything else. Or I was just very focused on it, and so I think that a little bit like held me back. Whereas it a little bit kept me from looking at other types of art creation and a lot of other outputs for my creative energy. In that, you know, I thought of myself so much as like the game developer that I even look at like the music side of things as something that, you know, I left it to David or I left it for someone else to work on while I focused on game design. And I think it's very important as any sort of creator to always, you know, keep your tentacles on as many sort of like forms of expression as you can, for sure.
Keep your tentacles loose and open. Right? That's a very tangible lesson. You think it's an advantage to be like 100% dedicated to one kind of discipline. But you're now reflecting that commitment you perceived you had to make was an obstacle for other things that could have been creatively beneficial. So like, I guess before we wrap it, and because like I said, there are people working and studying games in all of its roles while watching this perhaps. So are there any other sort of tangible lessons that you were reflecting on that you sort of feel you know now, but you didn't know when you're starting out and making a project like Panoramical?
Yeah, I mean, I think something like what I did today, for example, like, I like a more experimental or more like, abstract performance sort of based kind of work is something that when I was making games, I never thought, was even possible for me, or, I think one lesson that to take is, to try to not dismiss some other types of art that have a lot to teach you as a creator, and try it, like the same thing I said, like just try and keep an open mind, engage with lots of different types of art, and also try and create lots of different types of art. Like I think that's the best way to bring all of those ideas back into games, and try and break a little bit off of this idea that we have to make this one type of game that has to go on Steam, that has to say this or that, or you're not allowed to treat certain topics, certain subjects, or certain matter that you care about. I think it's important.
Terrific. And the more disciplines, I mean, as a meta medium, that video games can contain the ideas or aesthetics of any other kind of medium. It pays to be paying attention to all other kinds of media while dealing with games. We are kind of out of time.
Sounds good.
But can I ask you two lightning round questions, then we can wrap?
Let's do it.
Okay. These are I like to survey all my guests with a couple or two or three questions that I'm very interested to get everyone's take on. And so you can answer these in as quick a manner as possible, maybe even one word if you want. All right. How do you situate your work in relation to the term contemporary art?
Escape. Abort.
What is an environment that video games or your work around the field of games? Let me rephrase this. What's a space that games are not typically associated with, or they're not usually in, that you think would be fun if they were?
I mean, art is such a broad, boring word, but yeah, I mean, the spectrum, the history of human creation and expression and protest. I want to see more video games and protests.
There we go.
Without trivializing matters, right?
Terrific. And finally, this is a question about regionality. How much do you think one's region or physical location becomes imprinted in the video games or game-related work they make?
Yeah, I mean, we're people, we're monkeys. I don't know. We're in everything. There's no such thing as being, like detached from the environment you're in.
Absolutely. All right. Those are being an art organization sort of tied to Chicago, but now connected more and more electronically to other places, like Berlin in this moment. I'm very interested in the question of immediate environment and how it informs our behaviors and the choices we make. All that said, Fern, thank you so much. You've shown us so much.
Thank you.
And we're all out of time. This is the way we close because this is the internet, and there are rules on the internet, which is that when you finish a conversation online, you have to plug something. Fern, do you have anything you'd like to plug?
Stay tuned for this another work that's coming out. That's gonna be announced in a little bit, and on Instagram, fantastic.art, and you can.
That's great. Yeah, Bryce, is it possible to have that Insta handle flashed?
Flash it.
That's it. We just spell it. It's Fernet.
1 sec, I'll get it up.
Thank you. We'll wait.
Keep going and I'll pop it up.
Okay. We can do a little intermediary base while we wait for the Instagram handle. Cool. I will. That's it. Is that a short short
Yeah,
neck base or a long neck base?
It's a short tail base.
Yeah.
Very tiny and it's very pretty and
Gorgeous. Here we go. You can see Fern's Hoffner, and you can see Fern's Instagram there. For on behalf of VGA, I will plug the prints. We sell fine art video game prints, and if you purchase them, they support programs like this and everything else the gallery does, as well as the artists who made those prints. And please sign up for our monthly online zine called VGA Zine. And that and more is all available on VGAGallery.org. I'm going to finish by repeating our thank yous and credits. So thanks to producer and director of operations Bryce Poles, our designer and director of communications Eleanor Schichtel, the VGA staff and the VGA board. Thanks to the Independent Game Designers Association Chicago chapter. Thank you, Ross. Thanks to the game design students from the University of Wisconsin. Thank you, Peter. Thanks to the media art and graphic design and illustration students at SFAD at the University of South Carolina. Thanks to Mina and Marius. Thanks to game design program students at DePaul University. Thanks to Caleb. Thanks media art and game design module students in radio, TV, film at Northwestern. Thanks, Derek. How about thanks to the digital media practice students at Tulane. Thanks to John. Thanks to the Electric Mirrors for the groovy intro music. Thank you, the Oldham Music Centric Youth Brass Band, for the heartwarming fanfare that we enjoyed earlier and you're about to enjoy in reverse. And if you know an organization or group that would be interested in this program or have any feedback whatsoever, please, why not drop us a line at info@vgagallery.org. We would love to hear from you. Any parting words or catchphrases, Fern?
Protest everything.
Terrific. Protest everything, and thank you for joining us. And from all of us at VGA Fireside, please stay warm.